Good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, so I'd like to call the committee of the whole meeting to order. Chair Jack is not able to be with us this morning, so I'll be chairing the meeting. First, I'd like to start the meeting by the recognition of territories. I would like to acknowledge that we are conducting this meeting on the unceded traditional territories of the Shuswap and Huipachesset First Nations, and we're grateful for the opportunity to do so. We also have directors calling in from other territories, and I would like to also acknowledge those nations and express our gratitude and our respect. Just a notice to attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the Regional District website. And if anybody is watching online, if you have any questions or comments, please send it to responses@acrd.bc.ca, and we will review those questions or comments at the end of our meeting. So I'd like to start our meeting by doing introductions. We'll go around the room for the people who are here in person, and then we'll go online, and people that are directors that are calling online can introduce themselves that way. My name is Debbie Haggard. I am Vice Chair of the Regional District Board, and I am a councillor for the City of Port Alberni. And we'll go this way this morning.
Good morning. I'm Daniel Sayan, the Chief Administrative Officer for the ACRD.
Jack McClellan, Alternate Director, Beaufort.
Kel Roberts, Alternate Director, Area C. Mike Sparrow, Director for Cherry Creek.
Morning, Aklama Penikote. I'm the Area Director for Sprout Lake.
Good morning, Heather Zenner, Manager of Administrative Services.
Good morning, Jenny Brunn, General Manager of Community Services.
Good morning, Cynthia Dick, General Manager of Administrative Services.
And good morning, Chief Financial Officer, Terry Fong.
Thank you. So now we'll go to those directors calling in online. Director Roth, please introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm Susan Roth for Beaver Creek. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Beckett.
Good morning, everyone. Bob Beckett, representing Area A, Banfield.
Thank you. Director Coots.
Good morning, everyone. It's Klama Mariah Coots, Director for the Hochelaga Tribe Government. Thank you, Chu.
Thank you, Director McEwen.
Good morning, Marilyn McEwen, Mayor of Equillet.
Thank you, Director Minions.
Shari Minions, Mayor for the City of Port Alberni.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval of the agenda. Is there any late items from directors? Seeing none, is there any late items from corporate officer?
No late items, but just a request to move item B in front of item A if possible.
Absolutely. So seeing no late items, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Motion moved by Director Cote, second by Director. My mind just went blank. Sparrow. Thank you. I can't see that far. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. And next is declarations and conflict of interest. Any declarations or conflict of interest from the directors? Seeing none, we'll go to minutes from the committee of the whole meeting from June 12th, 2024. Is any errors or omissions? Seeing none, could a motion that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held on June the 12th, 2024 be adopted? Moved by Director Sparrow, second by Director Cote. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Director Cote.
Thank you. I have a question about the presentation did anything come further along from the Lady Rose Marine Service for requests or anything coming to us?
Thanks, CEO. Do you have any response to that? I wasn't here for that presentation.
No, there's nothing further that came from it.
Thank you. Then we have petitions, delegations, and presentations. We have members of the Sprout Lake Marine Patrol here this morning doing a presentation from the 2024 season. So do you all want to come up, or who's perfect? maybe first, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, and then you can do your presentation. Just push the button there.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Torps. I'm the lead hand for the Sprout Lake Marine Patrol.
And I'm David Symington.
I'm Ryan Tramer.
I'm Davin Rolla.
Welcome, and if you'd like to do your presentation, that would be awesome. We look forward to hearing all about your season.
All right. Yeah, so we're the Sprout Lake Marine Patrol, and here's our year-end presentation. Thank you for listening. Yeah, like I said, this is our team. I'm Aaron Torps. This is Ryan Tramer, David Symington, and Davin Ralla. Our training, small commercial vessel basic safety training, 1 day of theory, 1 day full on the water. We also did vessel registration and licensing training with Transport Canada, trailer training with Mel Francoeur, conflict resolution workshop with Michael McGregor, BC Parks Ambassador training, which included 7 courses relevant to our program, such as Adventure Smart, Equity, Diversity, Inclusive Workshop, Leave No Trace, Fire Smart 101, Indigenous Awareness Training, Bear Campsite, and Canucks Autism Network Workshop. Our goal: to establish a safe, enjoyable, environmentally responsible marine culture for all users and residents of the Sprout Lake area. As a team, we strive to achieve this goal through 6 different ways.
Awesome. So the first step in achieving our goal is we like to maintain a presence on the lake. Doing so, we are monitoring for any unsafe boating. We monitor for any wildlife or wildfire concern. We mark any deadheads to alert other boaters of the danger, report any hazards we've seen on the water, help boats in need of assistance, report any environmental concerns, conduct water testing. The next method we like to use is through education, using our QR code, social media, and our school outreach program to educate the public on safe boating practices, minimum boating safety requirements, invasive species, boating etiquette, and dangers of the lake. One of our newest methods that we've used is our new brochure, which I'm sure many of you have seen. It includes our fully updated map, our goals through the Marine Patrol and through the ACRD, information to and about invasive species, historical information on landmarks and just anything we can on the lake, safety information with important phone numbers so any tourists or residents know the proper numbers and where to call and where to report information to. Launch etiquette to try and keep the peace and create a more free-flowing environment. Wildfire protocol. Through the brochure, we've had largely positive reviews. It's extremely high in demand. We've constantly been having to restock at everywhere that we've dropped it off and multiple businesses, as well as we have newer versions and reprints coming in the fall. The fourth method is public assistance. This year, we continued the PFD loaner program by placing PFDs at the launch on a rack. We've received a bunch from the public as well, just dropping off life jackets. We aid public the best we can. We've had a lot of towing this year and a couple landslides resulting in trees. As you can see there, we've towed it back to shore. And we offer navigational assistance to those unfamiliar with Sprout Lake or areas within the Alberni-Clayoquot region. Number 5, coordination of the boat launch. It's a big one. We direct traffic, direct parking, try our best to diffuse stress and conflict. And it's highly appreciated. We've been given compliments for helping out.
A big one as well. We all know the bomber left this year, and that was definitely a big event. We had a lot of boats on the water, so we were aided with helping the RCMP and Colson's to make sure everything went well. There's probably like 250 boats when I was out there. Just having to circle around, make sure kids weren't trying to touch it and stuff was interesting. Number 6, community engagement. We continued the social media expansion, and this year it's really done well. We have 50,000 there, but I believe we actually reached 70,000 people this year through TikTok mostly. This allowed us to promote fun and safe information to people all around the world, or more specifically Port Alberni. And then another big one that was fun to do was we recorded radio ads that would play on the peak. We did 2 per month, so 6 in total, and we received pretty good reviews of those as well. We did topics such as boat etiquette and water safety, and those, just to name a few.
Some of our achievements this year are we collected 6 full bags of garbage off beaches. There was a lot of camping this summer, especially with the bomber bringing people in, so there was a lot of garbage laying around. We spoke to over 425 students through our school outreach program. We visited 3 different schools and just did some safety talks about being on the water. And we reached over 70,000 people through our social media. We spent over 250 hours on the water, just patrolling around, making sure everyone was being safe. We marked 8 deadheads. We helped over 900 boats at the launch. We had over 2,000 interactions with the public. This was at the launch, in the community, and on the water. And we also successfully towed 5 stranded vessels. This year we did not do a survey, but anyways, we did receive lots of feedback. It was primarily on our radio ads. Lots of parents saying that they really enjoyed hearing us talk. A lot of people really liked the brochures. Tons of people that came this year from other countries and stuff. So we were able to sit down and put a few things out in the map, and they really enjoyed that. Our social media was another big one. We had lots of engagement this year, and a lot of people said that it was a very creative way to deliver some good information. And also the new boat ramp, which people said was nice, but seems unfinished. I know that's a difficult thing to get done. In conclusion, it has been our pleasure to run this program over the last 3 months, and we are sad the season is over. It's a great job, and we had a lot of fun meeting new people and spending time on the water. We would just like to thank Michael McGregor for being a great team leader, and we're excited to see how the program will expand into the future. So yeah, if there's any questions you guys have, now's the time.
Thank you so much, and we really appreciate the great work that your team does during the summer. So thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Director Cote, then Director Roberts.
Through the chair, thank you so much for your teamwork this year. I didn't have any complaints, which is wonderful. You must have been doing a great job. Heard good comments. A question around, what was my question? Did you go to any events in the city to do any educational or outreach there? And any suggestions for improving the program for the future? Thank you.
Yeah, so we went to the Spur Lake Fire Hall and we did an event there. We also showed our faces at the staff party and the water bomber day. I think it was a sad to see it go there. And so we showed our faces there. Stuff that would help in next year for the program. Maybe an actual sign-off sheet for the life jackets at the launch. We don't actually have like a sign-off sheet. It's just kind of, we trust you, bring it back. So maybe making sure people would bring their life jackets back would benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Roberts.
Through the chair, thank you. Really worthwhile program. You guys have done a great job and I can see that in your presentation. Do you get an opportunity to go right to the end of the lake periodically or?
Yeah, so on the weekdays, it's generally not as busy, especially when the sun's not out. So we do find some time to go to the end of Taylor, if that's what you're
Yeah.
asking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Director Cote?
Thank you. You mentioned the slides, and I actually witnessed one of them happening on Dog Mountain. Was there any more signage put up or any connection with the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resources or whatever they're called these days, on what to do, how to inform the community that this was a danger area? Thank you.
Yeah, so they have not put any new signs up. There's still old signs up from when the fire had finished. But there was 1 or 2 new slides this year, and we did 10 to 1. There's only so much we can do with the dangers of falling trees, but stuff that did float out, we dealt with. And no, we did not hear anything from them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You guys do a great job. One last question. Thank you. So I'm curious, will this program benefit your education in any manner? So there, we've had biologists through and all kinds of different students with their careers, and just wondering if this will benefit your education. Thank you.
Yeah, as a student, I'm going into my 3rd year at VAU. I'm actually not majoring in any water stuff. I'm majoring in accounting with a Bachelor of Business Admin. And even if it's indirectly, I found that the skills gained through this for any student can be applicable just for, social dealing with public, and being in some sort of a leadership role. I feel that even if you are not necessarily going into a directly attributed field of study, this program for any student universally can definitely help boost the necessary skills to be successful in any degree or whatever you're studying. So I would say yes, 100%. Any student can benefit from the program.
Director Cote, I'm going to make a suggestion that maybe you work with staff and we could write a letter and put in requests for updated signage for Dog Mountain to better inform the public of possible dangers. Would that be acceptable to you?
Absolutely. I have talked with staff and mentioned, since I did witness one of the slides myself, I recognized the danger and saw the boats coming from the shore directly over to the impact area. Yeah, it's dangerous and people don't understand that it's like there's a tsunami coming, they run for the water. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, again, I just want to thank you for the tremendous job that you did during the summer and the service that you performed for the community. So thank you and good luck at school this year. We hope to see you back next year.
Thank you much for having us, and thank you for listening to our presentation.
Next, question.
Yeah,
Can we
go
get a copy of the slideshow and share it with the community?
Yeah, we'll put the slideshow on the website as soon as we're done the meeting.
Thank you. Next, we have Michael McGregor, Lands and Resources Coordinator, to talk about the ACRD Regional Parks Working Group Terms of Reference. How are you today, Mike?
Morning, everyone. Yeah, through the chair, when we adopted the Log Train Trail management plan, a proposal was brought forward to create, an avenue for the public to have more say into the Regional Park Service and to review initiatives and communications and whatnot. So this working group was developed to satisfy that request. And I think it's a good time for our community because we do have a bunch of active groups like the Backcountry Horsemen, the Outdoor Club, Riders of Alberni Valley, Alberni Hill Climbers Club. They're all active, they're all engaged with us, and I think that they would jump at this opportunity to, have more of a say in our regional parks and some of the topics that we face there. So the proposal is to, send out a letter asking for, expressions of interest in September, have our first meeting in the fall, and then we'd have, 2 to 4 meetings a year, depending on the topics that need to be covered. And then in the first year, we talk about, the Log Train Trail transition plan would be a big one. Other items would be like new signage designs, public surveys, open house engagements, and then also have it kind of be open to, other topics to bring to the group. So happy to answer any questions about this.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions or comments? Director Cote?
Thank you. So I'm just wondering if this is just for the log train trail. Seems quite specific to that as a regional park, but will it be broader in scope once it comes forward? Thanks.
Yeah, I'd say that it did come out of the Log Train Trail Management Plan process, the idea, but this group would address all regional parks topics and issues. I know that, the addition of other parks such as Great Central Lake has been something we've discussed before, and I think that's something this group could weigh some opinion on as well. So.
Thank you. So there is other regional parks at this time, Mount Arrowsmith, the Inlet Trail, also out at China Creek, we have park or whatever, there's area there. And looking at the trails system and further, there's been a lot of communications in the past, and I'm wondering if we can relive that, like bring that forward from the past, because there was a lot of really good information that was produced, and things sit up on the shelf and never to be seen again. And I think there was a lot of people that were involved in putting information into that. And I think it would be really valuable to bring it back. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I should elaborate that, Great Central Lake was just an example of one of the topics we can bring. So we do have the new multi-use pathway, Alberni Inlet Trail, Stage 1 and Stage 2, Mount Arrowsmith, China Creek Park as well, Log Train Trail. I think 6 in total regional parks that we talked about.
Thank you. Director Sparrow?
Well, thank you for that. I know there were some hot topic issues around this being parks. One of the things, what is Maplehurst Park a regional park, or is that a Cherry Creek Park? The first question.
That's Cherry Creek Park.
Okay, so it won't be in the scope then. Okay. No, okay. The thing with the Log Train Trail transition plan, which obviously gets a lot of airtime, if you haven't noticed, on social media. One of the things that I've been looking at and asked about is the Cherry Creek area where the housing is going to be quite controversial, I think, of how they're going to address that. So I think that maybe should be something we should put aside, or concentrate on the rest of the trails first and then figure out what we're going to do there, because it definitely affects a lot of people and puts a lot of quads in the roads where they should or should not be. We don't know where the roads really are or are not yet. So, if we can get a transition going plan for that and figure out how that should be done, or maybe put it back on the back burner for a while when we address all the other issues with the other parts, like the Mutt Park and the Log Train Trail and China Creek Park, would be a good idea. I think it's a good idea to put this committee together.
Thank you. Dr. McClement?
Yeah, thanks for your report. I'm just curious. There's got to be about 100 studies already in the files here that are quite dusty. Are they going to be dusting some of them off and looking at them as well, or is that going to be something just put by the side? And you mentioned signs and things like that, and that starts to get pretty in detail. And the only time I ever remember being involved was twice with signs that became a lot more expensive than we'd wanted, and they didn't seem to do what we wanted either. So good luck on that one. But just curious, are you going to be looking at what has been done in the past? And now that it's a parks thing, that makes me nervous because all of a sudden there's much more rules and I'm not a whole fan of a lot more rules, so just curious.
I'd say yeah, we definitely will be, looking at previous plans and building off them, and we always try to follow the recommendations and the motions adopted from those plans and from this board, and move them forward and build off them as well, right? So, as far as signs are concerned, like I don't think we really want this group to get into the details of designing and maybe they could help with some installation for volunteers and stuff, but I'd say it's more just kind of saying, bringing it to the group and saying, this is the proposal, this is the design we have, have we missed anything? Because, this is a sounding board group to say, kind of represent the public and say like, well, hey, this doesn't really speak to my user group or my community the way that I'd like think that it should. So it's feedback that I think we would receive from the public without it. It's just a way to get ahead of that feedback and make sure that we're doing the best thing for those groups too.
Thank you. Mike, you mentioned about 6 different parks that the committee is going to be looking at right away, but over long term, is there any plans to look at other parks? For example, I think I've mentioned a couple of times, the city does have 3 parks that are located in the regional district that I feel should be incorporated into the regional park system. So is there like immediate, medium and long-term plan to look at different options for these parks?
Yeah, I'd say so. The parks I mentioned are the parks that currently exist within the regional parks service. The idea about adding new parks to the service is something that this group can touch on, but I think a broader acquisition process and more say from like the board is probably the place to have those discussions. Like this group can kind of say whether they broadly support it or not, but I think the details of park acquisition probably does live with the board.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Any comments on the actual terms of reference? Seeing that, Heather, do you need a motion to take this to the board or?
No, we don't.
I guess that's it. Thank you so much, Mike, for doing the work on this.
Great, thanks everybody. I would like to just mention the Sparrow Lake Marine Patrol. They do have a more challenging job than it kind of seems on the surface, dealing with the public every day. And at the boat launch, it's a stressful area. So the group every year they do a great job, and it's a fun program to work with, and they do a good job representing the ACRD. It's a friendly face. So yeah, thanks for your support on that program.
Thank you for being such a great leader. Obviously, they acknowledge that as well. Thank you. Director Cote?
Yes, thank you. Before you leave, I just wanted to say thank you as well. The program was I think especially challenging this year with all the boat traffic with the water bombers flying around every day. It was a challenge. So thank you so much. It sounds like they had excellent training. You seem to have hit everything that they needed so that they were prepared. So thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you. So next on the agenda is our most favorite topic, ACRD Grant and Aid Program discussion. It's going to be led by Heather Zenner, Manager of Administrative Services, and Terry Fong, Chief Financial Officer.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. So this is our second discussion. I'll remind the committee that you met on June 12th and we had our initial discussion. At that time, you provided some initial feedback. And at that time, you asked for a menu of options. So today I'm going to present you 4 options to consider. And then based on today's discussion, if we're advancing forward, we'll aim to bring a draft policy back to the board this fall. With the intent of having a policy adopted and in place that can be communicated to the region later this fall so that we can implement a new program in 2025. Next slide, please, Terry. So first, I'm just going to review the items where consensus was achieved at the last meeting, and then I'm going to present the 4 options. And then there's just a few other items that I would like the committee to chat about and provide a bit more direction. Okay, so the items where consensus was achieved, there was support for uncoupling the grant and aid program from the budget discussion period. So what the committee had agreed to would that budgets would be set for the grant and aid as part of the budget process. So the budget would be adopted by March 31st as part of the financial plan. Grant and aid applications would then be received by the end of April, and decisions would be made in either late May or early June. And then the funding would be released on August 1st. So there'd be no change in the date that the money would be released to the applicants. There was also committee support for improving the application forms and the final reporting requirements. So what we will do, or we're proposing to do, is develop a budget spreadsheet that every applicant must provide with more information about how they're funding, how they receive funding from other sources, and really better understand what their financial need is. And then final reporting will also include a budget spreadsheet to detail how funding was utilized. And then I'm proposing to add a clause that states that if they fail to submit their final report, that they would be restricted from applying for a grant and aid for the following year. So if there's any comments on that, I'll stop there and wait for any.
I did look at the tape because I was not at the last meeting, but when you say this discussion is going to be uncoupled from the budget, does that mean in the budget we'll just set an amount and then we work down from there?
That's correct. Yeah. Okay. So the buckets is what we're referring to, each grouping of grant and aid. And so, yeah, each of those buckets would set a budget at budget time, not knowing what the grant applications would be. Okay. We'll move on. So there's 5 definitions that are proposed to be added to the new grant and aid policy. The definitions are in your report, so I'm not going to go into detail on these, but they're provided so that it becomes very clear who can apply for a grant and aid and who is not eligible. If there's any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, we'll just keep going.
Dr. Sparrow.
Thank you for that. Under societies, it says here, must not have as one of its purposes the carry on of a business or for profit or gain or carrying on business for the advance or support purposes of society is not prohibited. I'm just wondering how that would work for, thanks. How that would work for like the Salvation Army and those kind of societies that would apply, would they consider for gain or not? Because they might have some profit available in there.
I think if they have a profit, they have any association with profit, they wouldn't be eligible.
Dr. Roth.
Thank you. Can we add ineligible organizations too? Because it might help people figure out ahead of time whether or not they would qualify. I'm looking at BC Gaming's list, and they do a lot of grant funding through their organization, and their criteria includes, for ineligible organizations, if they're a member funded society, if it's an ancillary group, sustaining a for-profit business, if it's a chamber of commerce or board of trade, because they are member funded organizations. And the thing with member-funded organizations is that they're primarily serve their members. It's not necessarily for the benefit of the community. And upon dissolution or liquidation, a member-funded society may distribute its money to other property to its members. If it's a federal, provincial, regional, municipal, First Nations, or other local government, these are just the type of organizations that don't qualify for provincial government funding. And I think it would be good for us to adopt the same type of thing. Would that be possible?
We can certainly look into it. I have some questions about the relevance to the Chamber of Commerce. So we have issued grant and aids through the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce. So that statement, as you read it, would exclude them, which I don't know.
That's right. It's because they're a member-funded organization. It's different. You know, like a society is not a member-funded organization. But yeah, I could provide more information on that too. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I do have to dispute the statement that you made that member-funded organizations such as Chamber of Commerce work solely for the members. They do a lot of really good work in the community. And so it's not just solely for their members.
That, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying what BC Gaming does, and they won't allow any funding to go to Chamber of Commerce or Board of Trades because of it.
Director McClement?
Yeah, along that line, you, under nonprofit or not-for-profit in the right up here, it says a nonprofit or not-for-profit organization does not include a community contribution company, CCC. Sounds like something in the history there, but what does that mean?
Yeah, that came out of this year's grant applications. We had a community contribution apply. So at that time, it's a type, I mean,
It's a nonprofit for profit organization. So I don't know if you remember Potluck Ceramics. So they sold pottery to make money in order to give to charitable organizations. So does that make sense? Okay. So profit for nonprofit.
so just for my clarity, I'll need to know if the committee wants me to investigate creating an ineligible definition. Because that's a change if we're not going to be considering grant and aid applications for the chamber.
Carrie?
So I just wanted to talk because I believe Director Roth that there was municipalities were listed as ineligible as well. And I will note that historically we have done a contribution from Sprout Lake and Cherry Creek to the city of Port Alberni through a grant and aid process to eliminate the residents paying the non-city resident rate. So although we're working on what that looks like in the future through the aquatics discussion, at this point, that is how those residents are accessing that. So if we were to add that clause and include governments, we would either have to establish a service in order to do that same thing that we're doing now, or we would no longer be able to provide that funding. So that's just for information. And same with the Chamber of Commerce, they would no longer be eligible, which just awareness for the committee.
Did you have another comment, Director Roth? You have your hand up.
I would just like to say, like for Beaver Creek, I believe there's would it be a bylaw where we contribute to services in the city? Maybe perhaps for Cherry Creek, we could do the same thing like you were talking about, rather than having it as a grant and aid.
Yes, that's definitely an option, but that would need to go through an public assent process, whether that be a referendum or an alternate approval process. So that's not something that would be able to be done in advance of, say, next year's grant and aid applications. But yes, long-term, absolutely.
So maybe we can make this so we can make an ineligible list, and we can note that in the future it may change. You know, not include that for now.
My preference would be to keep it, define what organizations are eligible, and then if something comes up that we question, we can deal with it on a case-by-case basis. Anybody else has a comment on that? Director Cote?
Thank you. If we put this in as our policy, how would we jump out of the policy? Like, why would we put it in if we're not going to follow it, is what I'm saying.
Can you clarify your question a bit better?
If we're saying these organizations are not eligible, and that's our policy, why would we put a policy in if we're already saying that we're not going to stick to it? Is just my question. I don't like making bylaws and policies that we're not enforcing or we're not following when right up front, we're not even thinking that we will. Because I can think of, a few instances where there may be somebody that comes forward asking for a grant aid and they're not registered and they're just a different organization that's not within our prescribed allowable organizations.
Well, then they wouldn't be eligible. There is a clause in here where she has, if you're not eligible or you can get $500. That's one of the options. So for example, if you're not for profit or if you're a organization that is not a registered society, but you want to put on an event and they can apply to us and get up to $500. That's how the eligibility would come in. So does that answer your question? No?
No, Sprout Lake does the grant and aid to the city. So was that eliminated now? I would prefer to continue on with that at this point. Because I don't want to do an assent. I don't want to go to referendum at this point.
Yeah, that's what we're discussing, if you want to put that in or not. So my preference would be to just have organizations that are eligible, as what Heather has done here in her report, and not include what is not eligible, which is suggested by Director Roth. Yeah, Director Sparrow, then Director Minions.
Thank you. I agree with Director Cote here, because right now, if we put it in as restrictive and then we have a problem getting our referendum through within our grant and aid to the city, won't be there in time. So it's going to take a while to get there. So, and we also have a filter mechanism of saying no. Whenever we said no a lot last year, and we probably will again this year, unfortunately. But that's what we can do. We don't need to restrict it on the way in. We can have the ability to do it here, and also we have the latitude to figure out if we need this new program, if it is a different thing we thought about, and maybe conflicting with what is going to be put in place. So I'd rather keep the variety open and decide ourselves than restrict it before it comes in and have no ability to maneuver later on. That'd be my preference. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Minions, then Director Roth. Please go ahead, Director Minions.
Thank you. Just wanted to echo Director Cote's statements as well. I think that we now is the time to have the discussion. And if we are intending to, not fund municipalities this way, or intending to not fund the Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, then let's put that in. But we should not be creating a policy that we don't intend to follow, or that we intend to have exceptions to for the foreseeable future. Let's create the policy that we want and let's follow it. And I think that what the issue is here is that we don't have necessarily alignment on the board. So let's have that discussion. If someone wants to propose not funding municipalities this way, or not funding Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, this way, then propose that. And I think that a vote on those types of suggestions will be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Roth.
Yeah, I'd like to propose that we look further into how the Chamber of Commerce is set up, and also what are member-funded organizations, and maybe bring that back to the board and have this at a later discussion. And as far as the municipal part goes, they really don't belong in a grant and aid, and they should be a bylaw, but we can deal with that too in the future. So I don't have a problem not having ineligible organizations at this time. I would just like to look further at what, why is the provincial government, why have they done this? There's got to be a reason. And I think it's because of how they're set up and how they're tied to for-profit. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Director Cote.
Thank you. The $500 that you mentioned that could be accessible, is that per area or inclusive? Thank you.
So I'll talk about that one on a different slide, but it can be in any of the grant and aid buckets. So it could be in an electoral area bucket, or it could be a regional bucket. So it really, it can be added on to any of the options that I'm presenting here today.
Sorry, I got ahead of myself, Heather.
Just a little bit of clarification there. So could I apply to every area for $500 on the same grant is what I'm asking? Not inclusive, like, it's $500 to the whole regional district, or it's $500 to Sprout Lake, period. Thank you.
I haven't defined that. It's really up to the committee to provide their support. I threw this out as an idea, and so I'd like feedback today on whether you support that idea, and if you want to have just one application throughout the regional district, then you could set that parameter.
Okay, so Heather, did you make a note to look into how the Chamber of Commerce is funded? Perfect, thank you. Any final questions or comments before we move on? Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to present the 4 different options. So I'll do one at a time, and then I'll stop after each option and let the committee have a discussion. So the first option, as laid out in your report, this option has 9 different buckets. The first bucket being an Alberni Valley focus, being the 4 electoral areas plus the city of Port Alberni. The second bucket is a West Coast one, including Area C, Ucluelet, and Tofino. Third bucket being a regional grant and aid, including the 6 electoral areas and the 3 municipalities. And then the following 6 buckets are set up for individual electoral areas. So the first 3 buckets have been set up so that the participants are set. So there's no ability, if the committee agrees with this structure, that any one applicant or any one area could remove themselves if they weren't happy with a particular grant and aid application. So the idea would be that Alberni Valley grant and aids would be reviewed at an Alberni Valley and Banfield meeting, and that committee would make a recommendation on the grant and aids that they would want to support within the budget that's been allocated at budget time. The electoral areas would set their own budget at budget time, and they could issue grant and aids how they choose. So that would be decided on by the electoral area director. They could set a budget of 0 if they don't feel that they have money to extend to this program at any one year, or it can be up to any amount that they choose. Just a reminder that any final budget adoption is done by the board of directors, and it's done by a weighted vote. So just a reminder also that you would be setting the budget without knowing what grant and aid applications are going to be submitted. I've also included some example grant and aid applications that would be expected by category. Terry, if you could go to the next slide. There are some considerations that the committee should think about. The ability to opt out is not going to be available. I have not included Banfield in either the West Coast or the Alberni Valley buckets. So if that was to stay as is, there'd be no further contributions to Sage Haven, Victim Services, Marine Rescue Society, as Banfield had contributed to those in the past. Or another option to be considered would be for Banfield to join either the Alberni Valley bucket or the West Coast bucket. So that's something for Director Beckett to consider. One consideration is that it may be difficult for applicants to know which grant and aid to apply for. And we've developed a flow chart that's in your report that would help applicants figure this out. They'd probably also require some input from staff to help decide which ones to apply for. And then Treaty Nations needs to also be considered. And this is the same for basically every option that we're going to talk about today, is how should we incorporate Treaty Nations into these? Should they be incorporated into the regional grant and aid bucket so that it's truly a regional grant and aid program where all board members are included? And then we had talked about this before, is creating a service where it makes sense. So if a grant and aid applicant is continuously receiving funding, we look at creating a service rather than continuing to fund through a grant and aid. So I'll stop there and ask for the committee's input on this option.
Thank you, Heather. I do have a question I just need clarification on. So for example, one of the contributions for Sprout Lake is Sprout Lake special event, so they would have their own budget that would not affect the total regional budget, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Terry, can you go back one slide? So I did include a few examples. So yeah, Sprout Lake does have a special events. They contribute to Chamber of Commerce and then their contribution to eliminating non-city resident rates for the aquatic center.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments? Director Beckett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to Banfield, I'm not sure that I would want to be lumped into AV and WC. But on the other hand, you know, there are things such as, and you know, you've taken the slide down, but victim services, I believe, that may have a direct benefit and value to Banfield. Would we be able to, as you know, Area A, opt in for that one particular application? So that's my first question, and then my second comment regarding Treaty Nation. I think my preference would be that they are incorporated into it, so that we don't have the conversation where they have to get back to their nation, and so we're not sure what the status is at that point in time. But I'm not sure what the approach and how we would reach out to our Treaty Nation directors to see if we can get that in place ahead of time. So a question and a comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Beckett. So the way that we've set this up is that no participant can opt in or opt out. Like the group of participants needs to be static. So no, you wouldn't be able to jump into the AV bucket for one particular organization.
Just a follow up to that. So for example, if they don't opt in now, but they realize that they do get a lot of services from that particular organization, could they get that organization added to their bucket like the following, when they request it, or is that a possibility?
You mean change the policy in the future? Yeah, we can change the policy at any time if Banfield wanted to become a participant, but it would just need to be done sort of in line with budget so that we're not changing that halfway through.
Yeah. Dr. McClement.
Yeah, I guess the problem with option one is just that you're either in or out. And it's always been a flexible thing in the past, and this past year the flexibility disappeared on some things. So yeah, I think that's a problem with option one. That's all. I don't think it needed to.
Director Sparrow.
Thank you for that. If Banfield wanted to come in to say we're running victim services, could we make another line item for includes them as well as the ones already in there, like another pot just to help us out? I know
That's basically what we had last year, and we're trying to get away from that. We're trying to get set buckets so that there isn't this creating buckets on the fly.
true. The other comment and question I have is when it comes to Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, I know so Beaufort is not a participant in it, but we're in the valley and we all do benefit from the Chamber of Commerce, directly or indirectly. And I was wondering if there's any thought from Beaufort actually putting money towards Alberni Chamber of Commerce.
And the Beaufort residents been pretty plain what benefits them, they will contribute to, and if the Chamber of Commerce benefits them, I'm sure they would contribute to it. And maybe a lot of the agricultural business out there belong to the chamber, you know, and that's something you have to look at and just discuss to the next Beaufort Beaver Creek meeting.
Director Sparrow and then Director Cote.
Oh, okay, thank you. So when it comes to benefiting or not benefiting the areas in question, you have to understand there are direct and indirect benefits from the Chamber of Commerce. In Beaufort area, you have the Log Train Trail and you have Stamp Falls. So when people go out there and they utilize both the Log Train Trail and the Stamp Falls, they benefit Beaufort in indirect ways, because if they're an equestrian, they have to sometimes come down and get things repaired or their quads, or they may go fishing. And when they come back into the city and they need parts like lures or parts of tack for their horses and that, they spend money in the city. So Beaufort said, well, that's not a benefit to us. But if one of those organizations within the city has one employee that lives out Beaufort, then Beaufort has a benefit indirectly from those tourists coming in and spending money in the valley. So they do benefit from that. Directly, there are a farm out there that gave a night of dining, fine dining. And that also was out in Beaufort. So they, with the Chamber of Commerce's help, probably directly benefit from that. So if you have one employee in Beaufort that lives out there that is directed benefits from the Bernie Valley Chamber of Commerce, then they are actually benefiting from the Chamber of Commerce. So I think that we should look at this as a different point of view than exactly working out there, because there are people that work directly and get paid. Thank you.
And the director of the Chamber of Commerce actually attended that event, and she posted about it on the Chamber's Facebook page. So next we have Director Cote, Minions, then Director McClellan.
Thank you. I like the idea of setting the pot, but we don't have any figures here. So things could change. Just take, for instance, the Alberni Valley System or Victims Services. They have continually asked for increases in the past. So if the board says, yes, we want to increase, we want to double their funding, there's no ability to opt out or because it's a board decision. So I see that could be an issue right there when we don't have the figures as to what we're actually approving at this point. Thanks.
Can I just clarify? So for example, for Alberni Valley Grant and Aid Bucket, so that group with those participants would be set, and at budget time at an Alberni Valley and Banfield meeting, that group would set their budget for the coming year for grant and aids for that bucket. And then the grant and aid applications would come in April, and the Alberni Valley Banfield committee would meet again to review those applications. So they'd be reviewing all of the applications that come in and comparing that with the budget that you had previously set and selecting the successful applicants and the amounts that you're going to award based on the budget that you've set. So you're fully in control. The participants are fully in control of choosing which ones to give a grant and aid to and the amounts. So you don't know the amounts now, but you are in control of making those selections. That makes sense.
Clear as mud. Director Minions and Director McClellan. Please go ahead, Director Minions.
Thank you. Just wanted to echo Director Sparrow's comments on the chamber. And I do think it's important to note that I'm not sure if the Beaufort director has actually recently been asked to contribute to the chamber and opted not to, or if it's just sort of how it's been for a long time. So I think we should not presume that there's not a willingness to recognize the benefit from the director, and noting that we have an alternate here today who might not have all of the information, and as well has not said that he's opposed to participating. So hopefully we can go into that with an open mind and recognize that there likely is benefit to that area. But I think it's also important to note that the Beaufort director is actually our alternate on the chamber, and I didn't realize that they do not contribute. If we have one area in the valley that doesn't contribute, we should not appoint that person to represent us on the board. So I think that's important to note for the future. If the decision is made to for Beaufort to not contribute to the Chamber and Visitor Center, then that person should not be representing us. Thanks.
Director McClellan, then Director Roberts.
Yeah, I thought we were going to be talking about grant and aid policy, not the poor old chamber. But carry on, I guess. It's I think Heather, you've done a good job in laying out the options, and we should go through them. And my understanding is you want opinions from us what what it's going to be, and there will be a vote, I presume, at a board meeting as to what will happen, or it'll just be dropped. I don't know. So anyway, my suggestion is that we carry on, and as far as whether Beaufort or its director or alternate director, I was alternate director from this regional district on the Beaufort, on the Chamber of Commerce. And because of that, I got put on the Bulldog board because nobody else over there wanted it. So it's not always a good thing. So be careful. Anyway, enjoy.
Thank you, Director Roberts.
Yeah, thank you for that, through the chair. So I guess I agree with all the work that you've done thus far, Heather, and much appreciated. Director Saga's comment was that she believed that only nonprofits should be eligible for grant and aid. Those with local volunteer support, those offering a new and unduplicated program, infrastructure or service, those with clear local benefit and support. I believe the volunteer fire, search and rescue, marine rescue, victim services, and services to address marginalization and poverty should have core annual funding through the provincial government. And our role is to ensure this is adequate for local needs. If a local nonprofit identifies a challenge to local health and well-being and requires support to clarify the change or need, then we support the research and connect them with possible resources where possible. And so that's Director Saga's comment, and I agree with her wholeheartedly. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Director Roth?
Thank you. Are we going to have a slide that talks about the use of grant funds? Because I'm not sure when to bring that up.
I don't have a specific slide on that. So if you have, you can bring that up now.
Okay, so I would like to add prohibited uses of grant funds, only because I've seen abuse. And one of the things that I would like to add, that a prohibited use would be travel or other costs related to administrative meetings. And for example, annual general meetings, board meetings, staff board retreats, conferences. I know one of the recipients of a grant and aid fund that sent 2 workers on a week-long training conference in New Orleans. So to me, if that nonprofit organization can afford to do that, they don't need to be drawing from local taxpayers' purse. So I would like to add that. I'd also like to add, prohibited use would be professional development for paid staff. I know of people in the past that have gotten their master's degree or a degree at the expense of taxpayers. Mortgage payments, out-of-province travel costs, past debt, loan or interest payments. These kind of restrictions would really help us eliminate a lot of problems and handle taxpayers' dollars in a really responsible way. Thank you.
I do believe on the application form, the applicant has to state what the funds are going to be used for, correct?
That's correct. And that should be further improved in the new application form.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Do you want to go on to the next option, Heather?
Yeah, I just would like clarification. Does the committee support what Director Ross just asked, or is that a one-off from a director?
Personally, I believe that the applicant has to state on the application form what the funds are being used for. And then they have to do reporting at the end of the year, what they've used the funds for. And if they abuse it at that time, they don't get it again. That's my feelings. Does anybody have any other thoughts? Director Roberts?
Yeah, I concur. I believe that the new form that Heather's put together addresses all those issues. So yeah, totally. Thank you.
Director Roth?
I'm just thinking, what if the applicant just said something like general services or general expenses? You know, that wouldn't actually, unless it's something particular, it wouldn't actually highlight what it was being used for.
We always have the option to say no. Director Beckett?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I think that, with this new proposed system, I certainly would not be approving something as general as services. This has to be specific, and I think the board can certainly make a good decision based on an appropriate application. So I'm okay without trying to identify every potential no, based on both the application as well as the follow-up report. Thank you.
So I'm hearing the general consensus is it will be identified in the application what the funds are going to be used for, then we can either say yes or no. Does that answer your concern?
Yep.
Thank you. Dr. Beckett, did you have another comment? You still have your hand up. Thank you. Please go ahead, Heather.
Okay, moving on to option 2. So option 2 has 3 buckets, Alberni Valley, West Coast, and regional. So they're the same first three buckets that were presented in the last option. This option does not have any electoral area buckets. Terry, if you go to the next slide, please. Some considerations for the committee to think about. Again, the same ability, no opting in, no opting out. The participants are set. The consideration that the committee needs to think about is that this really provides less ability to fund local community groups through the electoral area directors directly. Again, Banfield's not included in West Coast or Alberni, but they could be added if they choose to be. This option also complicates how we provide funding to the Chamber of Commerce. The city also contributes to Chamber of Commerce. So in this case, if the chamber was still left in the Alberni Valley bucket, the city would end up paying twice, as there's no ability to remove themselves. So that is a complication. It also complicates things for how Sprout Lake and Cherry Creek provide their contribution to the city to eliminate the non-resident rate or non-city resident rates to utilize the pool. So I'll stop there and let the committee provide their input.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on option 2? Director Cote.
Thank you. I kind of like option 2, but I'd like to see it as like a hybrid where these are set, but yet the regional areas could include our grant aid for the contribution for parks for the city or Chamber of Commerce or whatever else separately. So this would be option 2 would be no ability to opt out, but yet there's still the option open so that we could work with the budget and include those other contributions.
So it sounds like you prefer option 1 over option 2 because this one doesn't have the electoral area director availability to do that.
I must be interpreting this wrong because I'm seeing this as this is what the budget's going to be before we've like this would be how much the grant aids would be provided in the budget, and there's very little room to make any move. So if it's predetermined before we go to the budget what the grant aids will be, I'd still like that ability to make changes in or out.
All of the options are going to have you predetermining your budgets prior to seeing the grant aids. The idea is to break the large discussion that comes with grant aid from the budget discussion. So we'll use like historic data for these first couple of years as to like what really has the Alberni Valley been paying in grant aids over the last, say, 5 years. And so we'll use that as the benchmark and for discussion. But then it takes the discussion about the individual organizations out of the budget part of it. It's more of a discussion of how much can your communities afford to provide in grant and aids to nonprofits as part of the budget discussions. And then when you get there and you get the grant and aid applications, it'll be more of a discussion of where do you want those funds to go. So in all options 1 through 4, you are still putting like the bucket of money, we'll call it, in advance of seeing how you want to distribute those funds. But this option 2 doesn't give you the ability to do something directly from Sprout Lake. So like, I know we've been doing a lot of grant funding towards the Sprout Lake Community Association, say through Community Works, but if at some point Sprout Lake itself wants to provide an additional donation to the Sprout Lake Community Association for something, you would not have that ability unless you went through like the Alberni Valley bucket and got the entire Alberni Valley to support it. Or another example would be the Cherry Creek Recreation Commission contributions. So yeah, so all 4 options are consistent with the budget being set separately than the distribution discussion.
Dr. Sparrow, then Director McClement.
Thank you. Between the two, I think I like option 1 better, just because the bottom line in option 2 says no ability for individual electoral areas to provide a GIA. And that in Cherry Creek be a big deal because there is the recreational thing. And also we do the tax to the city, become a city resident. And also if anything does come up and people want a little bit of money from grant and aid to do something that looks special, I'd like to have that latitude to be able to do that for the people out there. So between the 2 options, one's more flexible for me. But the other thing is we got to figure out how the Banfield works into all this too, because I hate to see them missing out on all this money given away. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McClement.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is a good idea to have a budget first and see how much money there is in the pie and then figure how you can divide it up. However, in option 2, people have decided under option 1 that Beaufort was being mean to the Chamber of Commerce or something. I wasn't too sure what that was about. But he knows here you got Alberni Valley Air Quality Council, and really that's what I think started this. Beaufort people, most have wood stoves. And the Air Quality Council sort of say that's not a good plan. And are continually telling us how bad things like that for us are. So I don't like option 2 either because you cannot opt out. And I guess that's just a comment on option 2, although I don't quite understand what some of the directors are saying, where it takes away some flexibility, but I'm sure they know what their problems are. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on option 2? Director Roth. Director Roth, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm not in favor of option 2 either. Thank you.
Any other final questions or comments? Okay, please go on to the next option, Heather.
Thank you. Okay, option 3 is pretty simple. It's regional grant and aid only. All electoral areas and all municipalities are in. No ability to opt out. Only regionally focused grant and aid applications will be accepted. So there's no ability for contributions to local groups. It would be really focused on regional applications that are a benefit to everyone in the region. Again, considering treaty nations, how should treaty nations be incorporated into regional grant and aids? What is their preference? And as always, creating a service where it makes sense rather than continuing to fund through grant and aid. So this one is just a regional grant and aid program, no AV bucket, no West Coast or EA buckets.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions or comments on option 3? Okay. Seeing none, go ahead, please.
All right. And finally, option 4. So this option is to offer a grant and aid program strictly through the electoral areas. So that would be 6 different buckets, 1 for each electoral area. Considerations for the committee. include that this is not a regionally focused grant and aid program any longer. There's a potential for applicants to apply to multiple electoral areas if their event or their program impacts more than one electoral area. So such as victim services, they might need to apply to all of the Alberni Valley and Banfield, and then also apply to the city of Port Alberni. Same for search and rescue groups, North Island Film, Fall Fair, West Coast Aquatic, Hospice, Air Quality Council. It'd be harder for the applicants to know which grant to apply for. So there's no ability for treaty nations or municipalities to contribute, meaning that there's likely less funding to certain organizations. So the overall funding would likely be less in this option. For example, the city of Port Alberni has contributed to agriculture type grants in the past. And under this option of electoral areas only, this contribution would cease, or the applicant would need to apply to the city through their grant and aid program. And I will stop there. Ask for input.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Director Roth.
I think I like option 4 the best. It makes most sense to me because each area would have better control of how their tax dollars would be spent. I like this one. Thank you.
Director McClellan.
Yeah, I like the concept of option 4. I'm not sure why the municipalities are left out of it and that, but I see no reason that when option 4 cannot have them included. And yeah, they would be regional requests for the grant and aid, and the amount would come out of the budget the same way as all the other ones. But it gives the flexibility of the director to speak for his or her people.
Director Sparrow.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation of all 4 options. My preference would be to go to option 1 and to modify it slightly so we can get more inclusive. Option 4 means that the only people who will be putting money towards the program would be the electoral areas and not municipalities. And that may impact some of the other programs like the Port Alberni victim services and that, how we're going to do it. How would we fund that with just small base that we have when we need a bigger base like the cities, municipalities to help push that program forward? So, although I like the flexibility of option 4, I think we have to look at it more at the overview of a regional perspective. So, thank you.
I think option 4 would make it really difficult for the different groups. They would, instead of doing one application, they would be doing several applications. So it'd be very onerous on them. Director McClellan.
Yeah, maybe Heather, you could explain why the municipalities aren't listed in option 4.
So this option is just truly for the electoral areas to be able to fund local initiatives in their area. So it wasn't ever considered that municipalities or First Nations would contribute, and Terry's going to add more to it.
So as a regional district, if something is one municipality only, then it's really not deemed to be at a regional district table. It's deemed to be at the municipal table. So for the municipalities and the treaty nations, if we're going to supply funding through our budgeting mechanisms, then it would be because we're working together, not because we're doing things separately. So if the request would be that it actually flows through this board, but they would be just checking the box to say they also want to apply to the city of Port Alberni, I would end up having to have like a city of Port Alberni only service in order to fund that, and that doesn't match the regional district model. So if we're wanting it to be a more regional approach, then I think everyone's leaning towards option 1. If you're wanting the nonprofit organizations to apply separately to those municipalities and then just do the rural areas through the regional district, then it would definitely be option 4. So it's just whether the committee would like to take a more regional approach to supporting these organizations or doing them separately.
The city does have a community investment program. So if the directors are going for option 4, then I feel that we can stay out and encourage organizations to apply through the community investment program. That kind of makes more sense to me. But Director Roth, Director Beckett, Director Minions, and Director McEwen, please go ahead, Director Roth.
I agree. I think the city has a their own grant and aid program, and organizations could apply separately to them or to other municipalities. I agree. Thank you.
Director Beckett.
Thank you. I think number one, staff have come back to address a concern that I know other directors have shared, and that's we need to get our overall tax increases. I don't want to use the word under control, but I think we as directors need to express what our thresholds are in advance. And this process, in fact, does that, so that I'm not having to worry or argue or deny a contribution because I'm not sure where we're going with our overall tax increase. So based on that, I am strongly supporting option number one. Although I'm very passionate about the needs locally in Bamfield Area A, I recognize that we do have a regional responsibility as a member of this board, and specifically with respect to grant and aids, as I've already alluded to with victim services. There's many services in the Alberni Valley and elsewhere that Bamfield residents, and although Director and Chair John Jack is not with us, I would suggest and argue that Anakla residents take advantage of that. So I strongly support option number one, and think it is our responsibility as a board to look at this in a regional perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Minions and Director McEwen. Please go ahead, Director Minion.
Thank you. And I'll just agree strongly with Director Beckett's comments that he just made. I would be disappointed to see us move away from a service that allows us an opportunity to work together as a region and in, subgroups that make sense, to move to sort of more just, picking and choosing locally without looking from a regional perspective, recognizing that option 4 would be less money to the city, and always looking to save money. However, the city proudly contributes to farming initiatives and food security initiatives outside of city limits that we likely would not fund through our community investment program. But we do that through the grant and aid process at the regional district because we recognize that they do benefit the entire Alberni Valley, and whether there is an absolute direct tie to City of Port Alberni or not, they are for the good of the whole valley, and that's something that I know myself and Director Haggard are always happy to make contributions to for the betterment of the valley rather than and the region rather than just the City of Port Alberni. So if the board decides they want to go with option 4, I think it will be less money to the City of Port Alberni, but in cost. But I think unfortunately it would be a step away from being able to effectively work together as a region and look at the long-term best interests of the region. So I would support option 1 as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McEwen, Director Cote, then Director Roberts. Please go ahead, Director McEwen.
Thank you. I agree with Director Beckett and Director Minions. I always prefer to think regionally. So many of these nonprofits do benefit the whole region, not just one particular area. And even though option 4 would save Ucluelet some money, I would opt for option 1, 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cote.
Thank you. I would agree. Out of all of them, option 1 is probably the best, but I keep thinking that there's something missing here, and brings me back to the Marine Patrol. I was told if walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. It's not a grant and aid. So, which is part of the conversation we've had in the past about the search and rescue, that it's continual grant and aids that come forward every year, and we have agreed to support them. And we said, you know, maybe these aren't grant and aids, maybe we should be looking at a different way to fund them. So just throwing out that out there, because that is a conversation that is coming to mind right now. You know, and there's quite a few things on here that we continually fund, and are they truly a grant and aid? Because I don't think they are under that definition anymore. Thanks.
Terry, would you just mind moving to slide 18 that says long-term agreements? So one of the discussion items coming up for Director Cote is, I had brought up the idea that at the last meeting as creating long-term agreements with the groups that we fund continuously. The committee was not supportive of doing that, but there was support for creating a service where it makes sense rather than continuously funding through a grant and aid. But the one thing that I want to make the committee aware of is most likely it's going to require some type of public assent process to create a new service. And there's always a possibility that the public doesn't support it through either an AAP or a referendum. So the committee must think about like what happens if the public turns down that service. Will we go back to providing grant and aids, or will we stop that funding? Because that could have a serious implication to how these groups operate in our community and provide good service. So I'll just leave it there. If you want to have more discussion about that now, that's fine.
Thank you, Terry.
I would just add that creating this policy and what we're doing with this policy wouldn't stop us from taking another step to create a service for something. This will kind of clean it up in the interim, and then if the directors choose to take something to a public assent process to develop a service, we definitely could do that. So this isn't going to stop it. I think it will help clean up our existing process, and then we can kind of build off of it from there.
Director Roberts.
Yes, thank you. I can appreciate the interest in option 4. However, you know, as a regional director, I believe that we have to consider the options that option 1 gives greater flexibility in the long term. And that's not to say that directors don't have the option to, when reviewing all the potential grants and aid, that they have the authority or ability to deny. And so I think that I agree with Director Sparrow and Director Beckett with regards to the utilization of option 1 as a regional, regionally thinking that would benefit everybody in the region. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Were you putting up your hand, Director Cote? Oh. Yeah, one thing I am concerned about is there is things that we could put to the voters for a service like the Marine Patrol. But the only thing that would concern me about that, you might have somebody from Cherry Creek, for example. I never go to the lake, so why would I want to pay for that? Even though it's a very important service that serves everyone in our community. And then if the vote isn't approved by the public, but then the director approves it, well, he could get in trouble with his constituents. So that's a very tricky one. Go ahead, Director Cote. Then Terry wants to speak.
The board actually made that go to a full referendum for the Marine Patrol. I think expecting that it would not pass, but it did pass. So you have to have faith in the community that they will support things. And it just keeps nagging me, I guess, that these are have been identified as, these shouldn't be grant and aids because we keep providing the grant. It should be on a yearly annual application, and it should be considered that. But we've kind of grouped them in and said, we're willing to annually pay this much to help to support these very worthwhile organizations. and it's not that I don't want to do that. I really want to, but I'd like to make sure that it's secure. And, you know, it's really, hard when we have to do a referendum or, create a service. It would be really nice to have that extra pocket that we could put these things in that wasn't considered to be a grant need, without having to go for a referendum to create that service, but thanks.
You go ahead, Terry.
Just that even if we did create a service for it, the service would be to provide a grant aid to these organizations, because we are not taking over like search and rescue services and we're not administering them. So it would still kind of reference the grant aid. It would just be a difference of whether you reviewed them annually or not. And then I guess the other point would be, at that point, it's a set sum of money. So you would probably lose a little bit of reporting unless we made that as part of their agreement. But you would then not be getting the annual report of what they're wanting to do with the funds and make a decision about whether you wanted to support that. But again, it is an option. Oh, and the other point I want to clarify is the Sprout Lake Marine Patrol is a service and it is provided and administered by the ACRD.
I missed the last part of the meeting, Heather, but can you explain to me what was the rationale of the board to not support long-term agreements versus a service? Do you remember? Because I feel a long-term agreement would be better than trying to create services.
I don't actually remember the discussion. I just remember there was a strong, there wasn't strong support for it. Sorry.
Director Cote and then Director Roth and Director Sparrow.
This is on this topic. So, we do have agreements, and that's what I was thinking of is, similar to the health network. It's an agreement. We don't run it, but the money flows through us and it's an agreement. So I'm wondering if we couldn't create something like an agreement for these type of services. Thanks.
You're smiling, but shaking your head.
Health network's another one for me. We technically run the health network. They do not exist as a legal entity outside of us. So we do technically run them, even though they do operate fairly independently. They don't have a governance structure beyond us.
Director Roth and Director Sparrow. Please go ahead, Director Roth.
I'm thinking about what the intent of a grant aid is, and I don't think it is for long-term contributions. That's just one thought. But separately, I want to know about considerations for option one, and I think it's talked about in a couple of them. But the part where it says, how do treaty nations incorporate into this option? Should treaty nations be incorporated in regional grant aids to be inclusive of all board members? I don't really know what that means. Maybe someone could please explain that.
Terry?
I can take that. So the treaty nations, when they have come on board, have very low assessed values. So they have kind of taken it upon themselves to kind of handle the grant aid process slightly differently. Some of them have their own independent processes, and then areas like Tokwat, they take our grant aids and what the board direction is, and they take it back and kind of line it into their budget process and decide to make contributions through our process. So at the default, we would just be municipalities and electoral areas at this time. But that's the question for staff, was we feel like if it's a regional grant aid that we should likely include the treaty nations in that service or bucket at the time, even though we'll recognize that some of their assessed values are very low and are just starting to are starting to increase at this time. So I think, yeah, I can't think of anything else to add.
Can I just add one more thought there?
Yeah, go ahead.
So are treaty nations incorporated like a municipality?
Yes.
Okay, I just needed to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sparrow.
Thank you. To answer that question regarding the long-term funding, I think grant aid says it will provide grant aid until it becomes stable or becomes self-sufficient somewhere in the application now. And that was why it was brought up the way it's brought up.
Yeah, it does. And the next slide, we're going to talk about that in more detail.
Do you want us to pick the best option before we move forward, or how do you want us to proceed?
I can carry on through the rest of the presentation. We're getting near the end, so perhaps we get through it and then the board can make a resolution if they choose to. Okay. So yeah, there's in the report, I highlighted a few topics that I'd like some further discussion on. So the first one is financial independence. So in our current grant and aid policy, it says organizations are encouraged to work towards financial independence. And I feel like there's differing opinions on this committee on what that means and should it be there. So many of the groups that apply to our grant and aid program will not ever be financially independent. For an example, the backpack program provides food to folks who are needing additional food to feed their family. So they are 100% reliant on outside funding. They're never going to be financially independent. They will most likely apply to our grant and aid every year. So I'd like some discussion on that at the committee level. Is that a statement that is relevant? Do we need it in the new policy?
I think after I watched the tape, I said to you, we should delete this because, and I use that example because that group will never be financially independent. Comments on this point or questions? Director Roth.
Is this the whole policy? And if not, can we create a new policy or staff create a new policy and we can look at it?
So that's what I'm working towards, is to draft a brand new policy for the board to consider. So that's what I will be doing.
Okay.
Director Cote.
Thank you. I'm okay with it because it says there that organizations are encouraged to work towards financial independence. Some may not be able to ever, and that's understandable. I kind of take that as, you know, knowing what some organizations, how they function, and that knowing they will never be financial independent. But if we encourage them to, you know, maybe there would be a big donor that would take on this program, or the province or something. No, I think so.
Director Sparrow, then Director McClellan.
Thank you for that. I was wondering if you put 2 words at the end, where possible. And that would probably alleviate a lot of the problems and, you know, saying we're trying, but if you can't do it, well, we understand. Wouldn't that be easy?
Director McClellan.
Yeah, I think that Heather's got a monumental job to try and put this into a policy. Good on you if you can do it, but all I can see is that every time the debate comes up, there'd be arguments about different groups. Some people will think, well, they should be financially independent, but they never can be, and I can see this going on for a few years. So if you can do it and make a policy, good. But it is difficult, and you know, your backpack program, I personally support it with my own when I make the odd donation here and there. But and it's good. So I don't know how you would do it here. However, good luck on you. And someone made a comment already today, and that the director would sure have trouble if they went against their group with their constituents. Well, Beaufort director will have trouble if he votes for anything other than number 4 here.
Thank you, Director McEwen.
Thank you. I agree with Director Sparrow that just adding where possible at the end of that sentence makes a lot of sense, because there will be some that can never be financially independent.
Does that work for you, Heather? I think that makes good sense. Thank you, Dr. Sparrow. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Director Roth.
How do we define financial independence? Because there are a lot of organizations that apply year to year to year, and they may be financially independent. Do we disallow it then? I guess that's why we need to talk about limits.
The policy will likely include a definition section, and on areas like that, I think we would likely want to provide a definition. And So there again, that's something that staff will take back. We can add a definition of what we see as financial independence. Just very quickly, I would say in our definitions, financial independence would likely be no longer needing or requiring a grant from the ACRD.
Thank you. Seeing no other further questions, please go ahead, Heather.
Thank you. Okay, so the next topic is double dipping. So I require further clarification from the committee, as there's some nuances related to double dipping that I would like the committee to explore. So the current policy says no double dipping. Organizations that have applied for a grant and aid to the city of Port Alberni, Tofino, or Ucluelet will not be eligible for grant and aid through the regional district. So one example is if an applicant is successful in receiving a grant and aid for a project that's fully within the boundary of one of the municipalities, does that preclude them from applying to the regional district for a regional project? And yeah, so I just like the committee's thoughts on double dipping. Is there any appetite in discussing this, removing it? Does it need to be there? Is it relevant, or does it depend on which option we choose?
Again, I think it's really dependent because, for example, community action team, the city gives them in-kind contribution, but they came to ACRD for funding for a special event. So I don't consider that double dipping, but some people might see that as double dipping, but I don't. Director Roth and Director Cote.
I'm thinking that it would be okay, say if an organization went to the city for an in-kind rather than a financial contribution and then came to the regional district for a financial contribution. They're two different things, so it would kind of work for me.
Director Cote.
Thank you. So we're specific about municipalities. What about First Nations?
Yeah, that should be considered as well. I don't know if all of the treaty nations have grant and aid programs, but that should be considered.
Any other questions or comments? Daniel?
Just as a question, is this something for the ACRD to consider, or is this something that municipalities and First Nations should consider? Like at the end of the day, the advantage of a regional pool is that a municipality can say, we contribute towards funding for X events through the region. And so if you want this, you can apply there. I see it more as a tool for the members of the region, not the region itself. Because I don't really see why the region would care. At the end of the day, if Port Alberni pays proportionately more because there's more households in towards a grant, and so if Festival were coming forward and got a regional grant, I think it would be up to the city to say whether or not they want their taxpayer to pay more than what they're already paying through the region. But I don't think the region would necessarily care. And I put it out there, but maybe that's a question for the board members to answer.
Director Cote.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think that the municipalities and First Nations should weigh in on this, because it would be double dipping would be with the municipalities or the First Nations as well as the regional district as a total group, unless we're just asking the rural areas or specific areas to contribute separately from a regional grant aid. Thanks.
So do you want to go with Daniel's idea? Who cares?
Who cares what Daniel said?
Dr. Minions.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I do think it's important to have a no double dipping policy in here. And from the city's perspective, if we are, and our timelines don't align, which I know can be challenging, but from the city's perspective, if we're funding a group, I don't think we should be funding them again at the regional district. And I do know that our council has had conversations even internally with our processes. We have a permissive tax exemption, a grant and aid, or sorry, not grant and aid, community investment program, and other mechanisms that we can fund groups as well. And even among our own programs, our council has expressed an interest to streamline and make sure that people aren't taking advantage of all the programs, but rather we limit how many they can. So I feel it would be clear direction from our council to ensure that there's no double dipping at the regional district. Thanks.
Director Minions, can I ask you a question before you go?
I'm not going anywhere. Yes, you can.
Would you consider double dipping it, like for the example that we use, we support community action team with room to hold their meetings. So that would be an in-kind contribution, but they came to the ACRD for financial contribution for the International Overdose Day awareness event. Would you consider that double dipping?
Absolutely. And I think our council has been really clear on that as well. And just going back to the permissive tax exemption program, I know a lot of effort was put in place to ensure that there's transparency on how much we're funding a group for in total. In kind, has a dollar value on it as well. So I don't consider that any different. I think our council has been really clear that they want to ensure that some groups aren't taking advantage of 4 programs without council sort of awareness, where other groups are only taking advantage of 1, or we're only giving other groups the opportunity to benefit from 1. So I think our council would have a very strong and firm preference here on absolutely no double dipping. Thanks.
So I'm getting some mixed messages here. What's the will of Dr. Sparrow?
So can I ask, was there any double dipping last year that we know about, or the probably double applications because the same applications come in, but was there any double dipping at the end of them?
I'm guessing there is for the community action team if the city provided some in-kind donations, because the board did support a community action team grant and aid. Terry, can you think of any other examples?
I'm pretty sure there was from a Youth Hewlett application too. I'm feeling like maybe Surf Rider, where they had determined they were different programs, but same organization. One had a more regional focus and one had a more in their boundaries focus. But yeah, I think it'll be great to have it very clear one way or the other. And even though the procedure or the timelines might not completely align, we'll be able to have communication with the staff at the other organizations. We'll just have to make sure that an applicant is aware, because if they apply to the Alberni Valley bucket, say, and they have received funding through the city of Port Alberni, their then application would have to be denied because they would not have that ability. So that we just need to make sure that they're fully aware of that through our application, so as they don't get let down.
Director Roth, Director McEwen, Director Cote, then Director Sparrow. Please go ahead, Director Roth.
I would agree that we should have no double dipping. It makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McEwen.
Thanks. I know of a couple of West Coast societies that put on multiple events. So like PRAS, for example, Pacific Rim Art Society, put on 4 major events a year. So they'll apply to Ucluelet for grant and aid for one event, and they'll apply to Tofino for another event, and they'll apply to the ACRD for a different event. And I don't consider that double dipping because they're completely separate events that have completely separate budgets. So in that case, I don't consider that double dipping.
Director Cote.
Thank you. So what would happen if, would this be considered double dipping if the regional district had an application, a regional application, and then for something that happened in Sprout Lake, say the Dragon Boat, whatever, and then they applied to Sprout Lake for a separate grant? Would that be double dipping?
Yes.
Is there a way around that then? That the community could provide funding
To remove.
outside of the regional.
To remove double dipping clause, like we either put it in and we don't allow them to apply to the organizations twice, or we remove it, and then if you removed it, you could still have those discussions as you're considering an application and say, we don't want to support this because they got this much money from this grant.
Further questions. So in that application, and a regional, could Sprout Lake contribute more money in that grant and aid, out like within that grant?
We haven't, so Heather and I have had a lot of discussion about this as she's been building this, of course. We haven't really discussed how that individual EA director buckets would work. So if you're wanting to contribute something from there, we definitely could consider it. It would have to be off of one application though, not multiple. And I don't, in my mind, in the application, they couldn't specifically be asking for additional funding from your area, because just in the principle of that, it would be double dipping, but we could ponder that a bit more for sure.
Thank you, Director Sparrow.
Thank you for that. So the application process final dates, June or something, if you change it to a new one, is that right? As opposed to March?
Applications would be due the end of April.
End of April. So what they could do is they could apply to the cities. And if that failed at the end of March, then they could apply to us. Right? It wouldn't be double dipping, it'd just be second chance city. Is that right?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think the city's program runs in the fall. Yeah. I guess another option that I'm just thinking about is if the regional district does not have an issue with double dipping and it's really only the city could amend their policy to say no dipping, no double dipping.
Daniel?
And I think that's where I was going, is that if the city or any municipality or any treaty nation, if they have a no double dipping policy, then they have the ability to say you have to pick either applying just to us or to the region. But if you go for the region, you're obviously going to get a more well-rounded contribution, but we will not pay twice. And that's where I think if we're maintaining a regional focus here for this grant and aid policy, then it may be better for the municipalities and treaty nations to have a no double dipping, but for us to just say we're regionally focused and off we go. It would also shift the onus of verifying that to the municipalities and the treaty nations, not to us, but the reality is that you're all here at this table. So to some degree, it's easier for you to see what's here than for us to see what's on your table.
I am concerned about Director McEwen's comments where an organization funds 4 different events from 4 different places. So would that be considered double dipping? Because that would severely hurt that organization and the entire West Coast community, because they put on pretty big events.
Right, so if we remove the double dipping reference from our policy, then they could apply to the regional district and District of Ucluelet.
So what's the consensus of the committee? Director Cote?
I'd like to remove the double dipping just because of the instances that we've been discussing. And I think it would it makes things less complicated. We could put something in there though and ask that if the applicant is actually putting an application within another local government. So that could be revealed then.
I think that's something that we should explore. If I can put words in your mouth, I mean, perhaps what we can do is have our policy acknowledge that other communities have a no double dipping policy and remind applicants that even though the ACRD does not, they may lose their qualification to apply to other people if they apply through us.
What he said.
Is everybody general consensus to go with that? Okay. Heather's writing furiously over here. Okay,
Okay.
good. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and the next topic for discussion is small grants. And so I'm thinking of small grants in the dollar value of less than $500. I had brought this up at the last committee meeting. So this would be an option if the committee wanted to consider inviting applications from non-registered organizations, so groups that aren't societies, potentially just a new group that is formed and is holding an event for the first time in the community. Consider offering them a small grant to get them started on a one-time basis only. So yeah, just looking for your thoughts on this. Is this an option that you would like?
Thank you, Heather. This is the $500 I was referring to earlier. Yeah. Any comments or questions? Director McEwen?
Yes, thank you. The Clayoquot Biosphere Trust does this every year. They have a small grant program up to $500, and very similar. You don't have to be a nonprofit group. You can just be organizing a block party in your neighborhood, something that's going to benefit seniors, something that's going to benefit youth. They have a certain criteria that you could certainly look at on their website, but it's very popular, and a lot of citizens apply for it every year, and it's just a really fun, feel good kind of thing.
Thank you. Director McClellan.
Yeah, just a question, would this be part of the grant and aid budget or would this be separate?
So this would be part of each grant and aid budget if so chosen to be. So it could be a part of the Beaufort grant and aid if we choose that option. Could be part of regional grants, could be part of AV or West Coast. More likely used for the EAs.
Director Roberts.
When we say one-time basis only, do we mean on an annual basis? Just one time?
Just once.
So you couldn't apply for it again next year? Okay, thank you.
I'm wondering if this is something that we could incorporate and have a little bit of extra left over for those very late requests. So if, for example, in correspondence today, we do have a couple of requests that we're not going to be able to fund because we've used all our grant and aid budget. Can we do that, Terry? Like keep a couple $1,000 like in the kitty kind of thing?
Yeah, like that's definitely up to the directors. We could keep it as part of your, like, we have an application deadline, so we would have to have a little clause in the policy about the application deadline, potentially not applying to these types of small grants, and how if funding was available, applications would be considered later in the year. My only hesitation is, do we end up with a discussion that's just continuous on every agenda potentially, right? Whereas this gives it a very firm parameters and deadline and discussion time. So that would be my only point on that.
Thank you. Director Cote.
Thank you. In the past, we've found money for applications for funding. The wrestlers comes to mind. And we found that money wasn't in the grant and aid at that particular year. So do we have a fund? And it seems that we've done like seed money in the past as well.
There is a line, like this is all up for discussion as this is gonna be a new policy. There is a line that we have, I believe it's $3,000, maybe $5,000 in the regional grant and aid fund or service that is called special events. And so that is just kind of surplus that's been carried forward over time as if events have popped up. But again, we have encouraged those organizations to then apply for grant and aid the following year. So for example, the wrestlers, they came one year asking for some money for their in-town invitational, and now they do their request through an application. So it would be somewhat similar to that process that we have.
Thank you, Terry. I didn't realize we had that fund already. Director Cote.
Thank you. So would that continue on the special events, that funding, or is this where this $500 small grants would come from?
that's where this $500 small grant, I think that we could just put it all as one pot and call it grant and aid. That would probably be my preference, just because we're doing the budget amount in advance of the discussion. So I think you would just want to make it one grant that's called a grant and aid in terms of the budget bylaw. And then you would just be having a component of that if you so choose to leave any for these small grant types.
Director Roth?
I'm curious if there would be reporting requirements. I think it'd be important to have some kind of feedback for that.
I think so too. I think the application requirements would be the same. My thought was that, you know, one of these small grants, they may become a society in the future, and then they would also need to, you know, follow the grant and aid process going forward. So I think that's good policy.
Sorry, am I hearing consensus to include small grants for less than $500? Director Cote?
Thank you. I have another question. Because of what Director Ross had brought up about attending something, a function or whatever, UBCM and AVICC have asked for students they've given them the ability to attend their conventions, but it's only for 50% of the funding. So if we found a student that we would want to send to one of these conventions, would we be able to use this small grant for something like that? Would we be able to consider that to be able to send a student? Thank you.
I don't know if I would do it through the grant and aid. Like, I think we still could budget to support someone to go. But I'm not sure. I would almost do it through our general government, because you're like encouraging governance and administration. So I would lean towards that more at the top of my head, but we could definitely think about that as we're drafting the policy and see, because I do know there are other municipalities and regional districts that do send members. So I could see how they're funding it as well.
Thank you. So I think we see a consensus to include this. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, the next slide is long-term agreements, which I already talked about. I'll just pause there in case anybody wants to add anything else.
Questions or comments on long-term agreements? Don't see any questions or comments.
Perfect, thank you. And I just wanted to mention as a reminder that this discussion on economic development will happen at the staff level, but it recognizing it doesn't align well with the grant and aid program. But that discussion is going to happen outside of this policy development.
Dr. McClellan?
Yeah, just a comment, the City of Port Harbour Economic Development was developed because the ACRD wanted out of it. And it was the director sitting in this chair who made the motion and pushed hard for it to get it. So I don't know what Beaufort thinks of it now, but that's what they pushed for then.
Thank you. Director Cote?
Thank you. So yeah, I'm trying to remember back in the day when we did have an economic development service. Did we completely eliminate this service, or I'm not sure how we got out of that.
I'm not sure if the service is completely dissolved or not. That's what we're kind of just trying to focus on, getting this grant and aid policy kind of all buttoned up and done. And then we'll turn our attention to addressing if there's something different that the directors would like to do with our contribution to economic development, including looking at if there's still a service structure or not.
Director McClellan?
Well, it had an office and a staff and everything, and I was on vacation one day and came back and it was gone. So I don't think we want to get into.
Thank you. Okay, so anything else?
That's the end of my presentation. So I'll leave it to the committee if you want to pass any resolutions.
So we have to go back and pick an option, though, preferred option.
That would be preferred, and I've started a resolution highlighting that there's consensus to amend the grant and aid policy, amending the term or the reference to financial independence, including those words where possible, remove reference to double dipping and allowing for small grant applications. So if the committee wants to select one of the options, that would be helpful in developing the policy.
Thank you. Director Roth?
Could we talk about something that wasn't in there and putting a cap on funding? Like, to me, that would help alleviate a lot of problems if we put a cap on the funding amount that we could provide to organizations.
I think we did discuss that about having an amount put in our budget and then we work out from that. Is that what you're referring to?
No, like if like if we said, okay, you know, you can apply for up to $5,000 for your organization. Because sometimes we get really big requests and there's no way we can do them. I'm just thinking, for me, it would help quite a bit if we said, you know, like, to me, $5,000 would be a good limit.
Thank you, Director Cote.
Thank you. I don't think that we can do that because of the applications come in with specific budgets. We can always set our own limits. We can say, you know, we only want to contribute $5,000 up to $5,000, but there is applications in the past specific to a specific project where it was more than 5,000. So I don't really want to have us hemmed in where we can't fulfill a good project should it arise, but we can set our own limits.
Any other comments on that? Okay, so I want to go back. What is the preferred option? I would like to get a consensus from the committee. Director McClellan and then Director Roberts.
Yeah, I'd recommend option 4. And is that a motion you were looking for, or just the vote?
I'm just going to ask for a consensus right now. So I was thinking maybe
No
we'll
such
just,
thing as a consensus.
if you could just go around the room and people can give their preference, then we can go from there. Does that work? Okay, so Director McClellan is option 4. Director Roberts,
Option 1.
Director Sparrow,
I'll say option 1, but modified for Banfield to incorporate somehow.
Director Cote,
Option 1, same as Director Sparrow, but also inclusion of First Nations.
Director Roth,
Option 4, please.
Director McEwen,
Option 1.
Director Coots.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, my opinion would also be leaning more towards option 1, recognizing that as well as echoing Director Cote's comments and having First Nations be included. I cannot confidently vote for any sort of position that completely disallows us to participate in that manner or have a responsibility to participate in that manner, seeing as such a high percentage of our people are continuously benefiting and utilizing these programs that we continue to participate in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Director Mastangelo, did you have a preference?
Yes, I think option 1 is leaning in a good direction. Also, similar, I would need to go back and speak with our Director of Operations and our Chief Financial Officer and the Finance Committee, as those are our avenues of having those conversations and delegating funds. And also there might be further discussion and suggestions on that process from us going towards the region on supporting these applications. And those are my comments right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Minions, did you have a preference? She's not responding, and I'd like to go with option 1 as well. So I think we have a consensus to go with option 1 with some modifications. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Beckett, I missed you.
I miss you too. Option number 1 is my preference, and if we are to be included, I would ask Director Sparrow to pay our contribution.
Thank you. Director Roth, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah. Can we get a recorded vote, please?
This is just a committee recommendation.
Okay. But
Yeah.
it'd be good if we could have a recorded.
So I just want to add a couple things. I think there's some people missing from this discussion today, including Tokwa and Huayet. So I think we have to have additional discussions with them, as well as following up with Ucluelet and Uchucklacet. As well, Director Beckett, I think Terry and I would like to have a discussion with you to figure out how best to incorporate Bamfield if that's how you would like to move forward. I think it is important for the committee to pass a resolution today. I have drafted one, but I think it would be appropriate for a director to make a motion first on a selected option, then I can help draft the resolution.
It appears that the preferred option is option 1. So can you put that in your resolution?
So you're moving that?
Do you want to perhaps read it out?
Sure. Thank you. That the committee of the whole directs staff to develop a grant and aid policy built on option 1, which includes the Alberni Valley, West Coast, regional, and 6 electoral area grant and aids, while amending the financial independence definitions to add the words organizations are encouraged to work towards financial independence where possible, remove reference to double dipping, and allow small grant applications.
Do you have a seconder to this resolution? Seconded by Director McEwen. Any final questions or comments, Director Roth?
Could we please have a recorded vote?
Do you do a recorded vote on a recommendation for committee of the whole?
It's a motion.
Okay, so I'm going to call the motion, and if everybody could raise their hands if you're in favor or opposed, and please keep your hands raised till I go around the room. So all in favor of the motion? Director Roberts, Director Sparrow, Director Cote, Director Hager, Director McEwen, Director Beckett, Director Minions, Director Coots, Director Mustangelo. All opposed? Director McClellan and Director Roth. Thank you very much.
Great. We are good. I was just going to say that what I will do is draft the policy now, and I'll bring it back in draft format so that the committee can have some further input.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we're at the end. Thank you so much, everybody. Any questions or comments from the public, Heather, before we?
Let me check. So no responses received by email, and I'm just going to check Zoom. There's nobody in the audience and no questions received in Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. Get a motion to adjourn. Moved by Director Sparrow, seconded by Director Roberts. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Have a good lunch. We'll see everybody back at 1:30. Thank you.